Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Introduce me, my name is Khikmatul Laili. I'm from Group 2, and here we are from Group 2 will present the results of our group discussion about Specification Test Development. The members of Group 2 are: first, Widaswara Agustin Hanisyah with ID number 057, second, Khikmatul Laili with ID number 079, and Ayu Irfa Soraya with ID number 133. Before we discuss about the specification test development, we will discuss about the instrument test development first. The test function will be very important and very useful if the making of the test instrument is carried out in a good and correct way. A test instrument is said to be good if meets several criteria such as test validity. Validity is the accuracy of the instrument measuring what is intended to measure. And then test reliability, define it as the nature of the consistency and accuracy of a test. And then distinction and difficulty level. The test characteristics of the test is the discriminatory power or test differentiation or the level of discriminatory test. And then the balance. Balance refers to the test that are all aspects to be measured. After that, efficiency or usability test means that a measuring instrument or test must be efficient and useful. And then test objectivity means that the test should have high objectivity. After that, test specify, then test difficulty level. The questions are formulated according to the level students' ability to answer them. And then test justice, and the last is test time allocation. The preparation of the test should be arranged by allocating time. Adjust the time of the lesson and the estimated length of the time it will take students to solve all the questions. There are several things that must be considered in planning a test. Namely, purpose of the test, knowledge, skills, attitude, or other things will be measured. Specification table, the suitability of the test items with the objectives, format of test items, long time for test difficulty level, level of differentiation test, the structure of the test form, arrangement of test item for each format, student preparation, where to write the answers, how to score, essay and multiple choice test scoring, tabulation of test score, and the last, the result report. There are some steps that need to be taken in developing a test of learning outcomes. They are: first, compiling test specifications, second, writing test questions, and then examine the test questions, after that conduct test trials, analyze the test items, and then improve the test, assemble test, then carry out the test, and the last, interpret test results. And here we will discussing more about the test specification development. A test specification contains a description that shows overall characteristics that test must have. The test specification includes: first, test description components, second, blueprint test components. Test description components. A test description component is a written document that provides important background information about the planned program. This information then used to focus and guide the next steps in the test development phases. At a minimum, the test description should only indicate who will be tested and what the purpose of the exam program. And usually also includes elements such as the overall length of the test, the type of item expected, The mode of test administration, such as paper and pencil, performance-based or computer-based, and may also include a plan for the assessment procedure and rubrics evaluation. And for the next explanation will be delivered by my friend Widaswara Agustin Hanisyah.
Okay, thank you Khikmatul Laili, and I will continue. The next is the test blueprint component. The test blueprint, or often called the specification table, is a table showing the number of items to be asked. The number of these items is adjusted based on the content and the process objectives. The content consists of a series of topics from which the competence of students will be tested, and process objectives derive from the behavioral goals stated for the course initially. They are the various mental processes involved in achieving each goal. This is the example of specification table for final exam mathematics grade 9. And after we determine the content and process objectives, we determine the proportion of each content and each process objectives. To determine the proportion for content, it depends on the emphasis placed on it during teaching and the amount of time spent. And for process objectives, it depends on how important you view the particular process skill to the level of students to be tested. And next is determine the type of test. It depends on the process objective to be measured, the content, and on skill in constructing the different types of tests. The next is determine the total number of items. The total number of items mean is 1 over here. For example, 50. To determine the total number of items, we must consider a few things. That is the time available for the test and the types of test items to be used and the type of process objectives and other factors such as student ability level. Next is determine the number of items for each content and process objectives. The number of items for content in here and the number of items for process objective in here. To calculating this, we can use this formula. Okay, to get the number of items per content, multiply the percentage of each by the total number of items. For example, in chapter 1, 20% times 50 equal to 10. You can see in here, 20% is proportion of chapter 1 times the total number. The total number is 50 equal to 10. You can write in here. And to get the number of items per process objective, multiply each percentage by the total number of items for the test. For example, I take memory. For memory, the proportion is 25%. So 25% times 50 equal to 12,5. We can round it to 12. And we write in here for memory. Okay, and etc. for the other. The next is determine the number of items in each cell. That mean is in here. Okay. To determine the number of items in each cell, multiply the number of items in the content by the percentage set for process objective in each row. Okay, for example, I take chapter 1 for memory process objectives. The percentage of Memory is 25%. You can see in here. So 25% times 10. 10 is number of items of chapter 1. So 25% times 10 equal to 2,5. We can round it to 2. Same with for in here, we can multiply 50% by 10 and get 5, and etc. to the other. Okay, the next is steps for preparing test specifications. Compiling a test specification that contains a description that shows all the characteristics that a test must have, that is the first step in developing a test. The preparation of test specification includes the following activities. First is determining the purpose of the test. There are 4 kinds of tests used in educational institutions. The first is placement tests. These tests are carried out at the beginning of the lesson and are used to determine the level of ability of students. The second is summative test. This test is usually given at the end of the semester, where the results are to determine the learning success of students in a subject. The third is formative test. The formative test aims to obtain advice about the success of the learning process. The last is diagnostic test. This test is used to find out the difficulties experienced by students, including conceptual errors. And for the next material, my friend Ayu Irfa Soraya will continue.
Thank you, Vida. Alright, I'll continue the explanation. P. Arrange the grid. The grid is a matrix table that contains the specifications of the questions to be made. This grid is a reference for questions makers so that whoever writes the questions will produce questions with relatively the same content and level of difficulty. The components required in a grid are adapted to the purpose of the test. There are 5 steps in arranging a test grid. The first is determine basic competencies. The second is choose essential materials in accordance with the scope of materials and materials related to the basic competencies being tested. The third is formulate indicators that refer to the basic competencies by taking into account the material and cognitive level. The fourth is determine the number of questions, and the last is determine the form of the question used. And then C, determine the form of the test. The selection of the right test form is determined by the purpose of the test, the number of test takers, the available time to check the test answer sheets, the coverage of the test, and the characteristics of the subject being tested. The forms of objective tests that are often used are multiple choice, true-false, matchmaking, and objective essay tests. Essay tests can be categorized as objective and non-objective essay tests. Objective essay tests are often used in science and technology or social fields where the answer to the question is certain and only one answer is correct. Non-objective essay tests are often used in the social science field where the answers are broad and not only one correct answer, depending on the argument of the test takers. The form of the test is said to be non-objective if the assessment carried out tends to be influenced by the subjectivity of the evaluator. And the last D, determine test length. The determination of the length of the test is based on the scope of the test material and the fatigue of the test taker. In general, the written test takes 90 minutes until 150 minutes, but for the practical test, it can be more than that. Determination of the length of the test based on experience when doing the test. Especially for the standard test, the timing is based on the result. However, for the test in class, the timing is based on the experience of each teacher. The time required to do the multiple choice test is 2 until 3 minutes for each item depending on the level of difficulty of the questions. For the test in the form of essay test is determined based on the complexity
of the answer required. Okay, that's all from group 2. I'm sorry if there are any mistakes. And thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.